Club Solutions Magazine podcast, where we dive deep with the leaders shaping the future of the fitness industry. I'm your host, Rachel Chonko, and today we're sitting down with someone who has been at the forefront of transformative change inside one of the country's most recognizable health club brands. It's been 1 year since Josh Ryder stepped into the role of president and COO at YouFit, and in that time, the company has undergone a meaningful evolution, not just in strategy and growth, but in culture, purpose, and people. We'll explore how Josh has reshaped the organization's priorities, how he balances empathy and accountability, what he's learned about leading people, and where he believes the future of YouFit is headed. From purpose-driven leadership to practical change, this is an honest, introspective, and forward-looking conversation you won't want to miss. Let's get into it. Hi, Josh.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Well, I appreciate you making time for me after a holiday. I know it's always crazy catching up. It's been 1 year since you stepped into the role of president and CEO of YouFit. So I would just love to pretend like this is a State of the Union address and would love for you to summarize where YouFit stands today compared to when you started.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, compared to when I started 4 years ago is obviously very different than where we are today. And then even from last summer, it's a pretty substantial difference in terms of financial health, as well as our growth plans and growth trajectory. And we continue to do really well as it relates to our mature locations. We've been challenged as it relates to the brand and new boxes around us from competitors. And, I'm really happy at this point to be able to say we're opening 2 new locations. They're a little delayed because of construction stuff, but at the end of the day, we're in a place today where we haven't been the entire time I've been here, which is opening 2 locations, being able to talk about growth. And I think that's an exciting place to be. We've done a lot of process improvements and created a lot of efficiencies within the 4 walls and above the 4 walls to make the business just run smoother than it was and more cost effectively as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little bit of a background refresher on how many locations you had?
Sure.
And just the kind of journey that the brand's experienced.
Yeah. So when I got to YouFit, we were 80 locations, and we had exited bankruptcy in 2021, April, or I think February 2021. I came into the business at the very end of 2021 and started as the chief revenue officer. And immediately one of the biggest challenges I saw was that we had way too many locations in far-flung locations that weren't anywhere near Florida. We had 2 gyms in Arizona. We had 4 gyms in Texas. We had a gym in Alabama. We had a lot of the onesies, twosies that didn't make a lot of sense regionally. And again, I wasn't here for the post-bankruptcy or bankruptcy process, so I can't speak to the thought process that went into keeping those locations. But it was very clear to me that in order for us to be a more successful operation, we'd need to skinny down the number of locations that we had. And so over the course of the next kind of 2.5 to 3 years, we went from about 80 locations to 56, and now we're sitting at about 52 locations. And we'll end this year at that count. And then there's a lot of opportunity not only to expand our brand and kind of compete more effectively against the competitors that we see in our major markets, which is obviously Miami, Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale, and we have some locations in West Florida as well. The biggest opportunity for us is really to make sure that we have the right footprint in place. During the times of growth, when YouFit Health Clubs was growing quickly, I think there was a lot of, I would say, let's just land grabs to try to increase the club count as opposed to more thoughtful growth. So we have square footage anywhere from 6,800 square feet as our smallest location to 30,000 square feet in Miami. So it's a very inconsistent footprint regionally. And so one of the things that I always focused on, not only just really focusing on the regional footprint and where we're successful, but also how can we take some of our smaller locations and move them into larger square footage. And so that's actually what we're doing. In one location, we're moving a 12,000 square foot gym 2 doors down to a 20,000 square foot space. And that's a brand new location in Davie that'll be opening in January. Another location that was basically, obviously malls have been up and down for the last 10 to 15 years. There's a mall in Boynton Beach that has really just been on the downturn for a long time. Most major tenants have left, and we're one of the remaining tenants in that mall. And so we knew we needed, in order to drive the most traffic and get the most members, as well as have a really good experience, we would need to move that location. And that was evident when I got here. And so we're finally able to take advantage of that, moving into a Big Lots. So moving from about a 19,000 square foot space in a tenantless mall into about a 26,000 square foot box in Boynton Beach, right on Congress, which is a really busy street in that area. So that's another exciting move for us is strengthening the brand and really growing intelligently as opposed to just going out for land grabs and just number of units.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, it sounds when you came on, there was like some specific challenges that you had to overcome. What have been your first leadership priorities?
Yeah, I think for us, focus, right? How can we focus more effectively on what we can control? What can we do to make sure that we have a really good member experience walking through the door, good guest experience? And so one of the things that we did last year was really focusing on how can we make marketing more effective than it has been in the past? How can we make sure that when the leads walk in, we capitalize on them and convert them as quickly as possible? And so we also took advantage of really looking to see like how many labor hours we're using at the front desk and in the gym and making sure we're using that as intelligently as possible. And so we actually reduced a lot of labor hours and focused on having a really clean sales process and something that we actually came into the new year heavier probably than we needed to be on the labor side. And so we were able to find a lot of process efficiencies and cut labor really pretty drastically across the board in order to drive more profitability. But in doing that, we've seen our conversion rates of marketing leads go up by 10, 15 points, depending upon the club and region. And
Really?
that's something that we've been really proud of. Our attrition has improved year over year, which is a good thing to see. And then we continue to do well as it relates to execute on personal training sales.
Oh, wow. Are you able to share a couple of the strategies for reducing labor costs? Because I know other club operators will be really interested in that.
Yeah, I think some of the things is just what are your people doing? What are they spending their time doing? And is that time worth spent? So I think in the gym industry, there's this old adage of you got to make 100 calls a day or you got to make 50 calls a day. It's like when we dug in the numbers of the number of calls being made, it looked like there was a lot of tasks being done that didn't actually drive a return on investment or a return on that time being spent making those phone calls. So we can see into the data that there are a lot of times when somebody will have 50 tasks to complete in HubSpot as a CRM, that's our CRM we use, and they'll mass complete all those tasks at the same time. And it's kind of like, okay, so we're not actually making those phone calls, or if we are, we're dialing and then hanging up and dialing and hanging up. Like we're not getting a lot of return. So we basically just reduced the sales hours by a substantial chunk and made sure that we had people that were focused on like walk-ins and walk-in conversions. We have a centralized team that handles web leads as well as our abandoned carts. So people who go to the website and try and start the purchase process, and they abandon, that centralized team calls them out, calls them back, tries to sell them a membership or schedules an appointment into the gym. And so really it's about creating centralized processes that create more efficiency around the time the GMs are spending in the gyms, as well as making sure that the folks in the gym themselves are focused on really ROI focused activities.
Yeah, that's very interesting
Yeah.
because sometimes staff seem busy, but if they're not busy surrounding the correct behaviors,
Yep.
then
Exactly.
it's just a waste of time.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, maybe what's a leader defining moment this past year, a decision or turning point that shaped how you now lead the organization?
Yeah, I think a big one was in the middle of January. We did not see the volume we needed to hit our numbers from a join standpoint. And so I knew we needed to pivot quickly on the cost side. And that's really what drove a lot of the process improvements and focus on like how can we drive the same number of memberships that we're getting today, but do it at a far more effective cost than we are today. And so thinking about, again, the centralized team, taking advantage of them, reducing hours of non-use. I think that's the biggest thing. So really, I think for me, it's more about like, how can we be a more effective at doing what we're doing today? And then when we get to the place where we're actually are hitting our numbers, which we will be in 2026, I think that'll be an exciting time to see the fruit of that labor basically coming in and saying we can operate at that level and a lot more will drop to the bottom line and be more profitable. So it's really more about how can we be profit focused, but also somewhat people focused as well. And it's not just getting rid of people or not replacing people. It's also making sure that we have the right people in the right positions.
Yeah, that makes sense. You talk about people, and I know culture is very important to you. So, talk to me a little bit about what kind of culture you're instilling at YouFit and what values are important to you.
Yeah, I think UFIT's an interesting place because it's a spot where there's GMs who have been here for 5, 10 years. There's been some GMs who've been promoted to senior general managers who are now regional managers for us. And so there's a lot of continuity that exists amongst the leadership team, which is exciting to see and exciting to continue to grow. And I think we've put an emphasis on making sure that we promote within as opposed to going outside, just simply because, again, like it's a culture of we need to be scrappy, we need to be competitive, we need to make sure that we're taking advantage of every opportunity that exists out there. And so I think it's more about how can we be scrappy, how can we but also be supportive of the team and keep thinking about folks internally and making sure that we're driving success through individual development. And I think that's a big one for us is like developing our people to be successful.
Yeah. I know that you guys had done a field day as well and talked about you're trying to build an environment motivated by purpose, teamwork, and continuous improvement, not fear, which
Yep,
is easier said than done. So
sure.
talk to me about how you practically lead in that direction.
Yeah, I think it's really about making sure there's been leaders in the past who have used or threatened that they're being threatened by people above them if somebody's not performing, which I think I don't want to create a culture of fear. I don't want to have that. And so I think it's just reminding people that like that's not who I am, that I don't want you to be in a place where you are feel fearful of your role or job. Like I want you to be successful. And I think if you're not successful, what can we do to put you in a role where you are more successful or successful generally? And obviously, there's going to be situations where people won't be successful or won't be able to assimilate or be able to do the job that they're asked to do. And there's an opportunity to then see them be successful elsewhere. But at the end of the day, I think it's really leaning in and making sure that people understand we want you to be developed. We want you to be successful here. We want to be able to train you. There's no I think blaming upwards for somebody's decision to move someone is something that we've seen in the past, and it's something that I want to make sure that people don't know that's not something that was encouraged or condoned. Like it's something that was just frankly not there. And so again, we want to continue to encourage people to do the right things, be the right behavior, but we also make sure we lean in and train them. And so we have obviously anybody from my VP of operations to our senior director of fitness to our regional managers to our operations marketing manager traveling the market on a regular basis just to make sure that we're training and leaning in and not just going in to inspect, but also inspecting and then coaching at the same time. I think that's an important point.
For sure. What's been the biggest leadership learning lesson for you since you've taken on this new role?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is one of the things that I said at the end of last year was like 2025 was going to be a year of just execution. We've done a lot of changes. We've changed CRMs. We've done some website updates. We've done some marketing changes. 2025 was the year of no change. And then it quickly became a year of like massive change because of a need to make sure that we were driving profitability where we could. And so I think despite the fact that you set a goal or you set a standard or you made a statement about no change, it's okay to pivot really quickly. And I think that's the biggest thing is like in an organization like YouFit or really any organization that's large that has a lot of people and a lot of locations, it's important to be able to pivot, but pivot thoughtfully. And if you need to pivot quickly. So like we didn't go from like old operating model to new operating model overnight. We piloted it in locations. We found out what worked, what didn't work, how many hours were needed to operate front desk from opening to closing, how many maintenance hours were needed. And so we didn't just paint everybody with the same brush and just shove everybody. We recognized that there's a difference between high volume locations that see a ton of check-ins to lower volume locations that don't have as many check-ins in smaller markets. But there's an opportunity to make sure that we capitalize on there's a base minimum number of hours you need to operate. But then in order to make sure that we're servicing the members at the heavier locations, we need to make sure we have more hours dedicated to them. So it's a combination of being able to, again, pilot it, test it, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then slowly implement it over time. So I think by the time August hit, we had implemented it across all of the companies. So it took 4 months to do that.
Okay. How do you help staff adjust to change? Because change is never easy, especially those maybe on site that aren't in the loop on the leadership conversations as
Yeah, I think
much.
it's about just helping them understand the why is like the biggest one. So it's like, what are we doing? We're reducing hours. Okay, but why are we reducing hours? We're reducing hours because when we looked at the phone calls that were being made, they weren't actually resulting in leads or appointments. And at the end of the day, like the number of booked appointments was actually like nothing compared to the hours we're giving. So actually, like, we're spending a lot more than we need to. And the other piece is like giving access to the P&Ls to the GMs was an important one. So when I got here, that was something that was happening at the time. Was previously, I think like when it was YouFit Health Clubs, there was no GM visibility of the P&Ls. And so we
Gotcha.
worked on that. That was being done when I got here, and we just continued to push that and making sure they understand, like, what does it mean to be profitable? What does it mean to not profitable? What does it mean to look at your revenue minus your controllable expenses, get down to an operating profit level? We don't hold them accountable to rent or things like that, but obviously we hold them accountable to labor and making sure they understand how that works. And so I think it's important for them to understand, okay, like what does gym operating profit mean to me and how that impacts not only my paycheck, but also the success of my location. And so understanding that was an important factor, and people to understand, like, we're wasting a lot of money on labor and we shouldn't be.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Speaking of pivoting, I noticed that you guys are adding pickleball, and I was just curious about what's driving that initiative.
Yeah, we originally launched it. Obviously, pickleball was really popular. A couple of years ago, we started offering it in our group fitness rooms as just an additional amenity to be used during downtime between classes. Some locations it really took off, some locations it did not at all. And for those locations it wasn't successful or didn't see a lot of volume from it, we just removed it, but we still have it in some core locations. And then we're leaning in heavily into pickleball in Boynton Beach. There's actually the way that the gym, it was a Big Lots previously, but the way that the Big Lots had added on to it, and there's a perfect, essentially, room that fits 2 full-size pickleball courts that we just saw as a big opportunity. That's a really popular area for pickleball, Boynton Beach, and an area where, if you're a member, you can book court time and there'll be like legitimate pickleball courts, not a group fitness room with a net. So I think it's going to be a lot more popular with our members as well as folks who come to the club specifically for pickleball.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, Florida's huge for pickleball.
Yes. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay. What does success look like for you at 18 months from now?
Yeah. So I think we're still sitting around 52 to 53 locations. We'll likely have another location under LOI and potentially under lease that opens in the middle of next year, and ideally another one by the end of next. So like over the course of the next 18 months, I'd like to see 4 to 6 locations that are new, that are opened. And that could be a combination of locations, like I mentioned before, which we're moving gyms to a better location that is more appropriate for what we're doing from an operations standpoint, what we want to offer our members. And it could be brand new locations from the existing footprint. Like I said, we're growing intelligently and want to drive a lot of value for the organization.
Okay. We'll end with, if you could, finishing the sentence for me. The future of YouFit
is growth. We're growing from here and stable. I think it's growth, it's stable, it's creating a culture where people feel happy and excited to come to work. I think fitness, having been in it for almost 10 years now, is a industry where people can get burnt out really quickly. And we see that all the time, whether if people come to us from competitors, they're just, I couldn't keep up with it or whatever. So I do want to create a culture where people feel happy and excited to come to work. Like, obviously we need to sell to be successful, but I do want to make sure that we have a culture where people feel happy and feel accomplished as well as satisfied with the work they're doing.
Yeah. Congrats on the momentum you're building.
Appreciate it. Thank you.